So this is the mounting station, and what we're going to be doing eventually is storing our consumable supplies like mounting board, and then we also have mounting tissue. I think what I'm going to do is put them in the lower cabinet, so as you need them you just grab one of each. So this is a way to permanently glue the photograph onto a piece of board, but we don't have to use any kind of adhesive. We use what's called mounting tissue. It's a heat-activated glue sheet, and it looks and feels like wax paper. When you pull the mounting tissue out of the box or package, however way it's going to be in there, just make sure that it's not two pieces stuck together, because when the blade cuts these in the factory, sometimes it kind of like fuses the edges together, so make sure it's just one sheet. Let's pass that around the room so that you can feel what the mounting tissue feels like. Alright, as I said before, this is our mounting board. Same thing as Matt's board, but instead of cutting a window out of it, we're actually going to be mounting the photograph right on top of the board. This is called a tacking iron, and this is to kind of tack the photograph to the board temporarily until we can put it into the mounting press. Over here we have the rotary trimmer, and if you've done any scrapbooking before, this might look familiar to you. Raise your hand if you've seen something like this before. Okay, they sell these at Michael's and such. This is a Kodak brand one because this is made for photographs. And what you have is you have this guide that you have to put the photograph underneath. You have a ruler at the top, and the blade slides in this contraption along two rails. And the two rails make sure that it's perfectly parallel to the guide. And you never want to squeeze these together, you never want to carry it by the rails. And so that you'll see these little icons at the top. It says attention. Do not hold it by the rails. So if you carry it like this, not by that. Right, because you don't want those to be out of alignment. Alright, and then this is the biggest piece of equipment over here. This is the mounting press. And right now it's plugged in and it's on. So I'm going to tilt this up so you can see these things. This is the on-off switch. So when you're done with it, you turn it off. When you turn it on, you'll see two lights. The red light means that it has power and it's on. The orange light, if it's on, that means it's warming up. So if you see two light bulbs on, wait. If you see one light bulb on, you're good to go. This thermostat dial is set to approximately 185 degrees, and that is the temperature specified by the manufacturer of that mounting tissue coming around the room. And I even made a red mark, just in case somebody accidentally bumps that. You just turn that dial. Notice how that orange light came on, because it's like, okay, you want me to heat up? Wait a minute, because I have to warm up. I'm going to turn this dial back to 185, where it was set before, so that orange light turned off, because it's like, okay, I'm good, I'm at that temperature. Let me show you the parts of this press. This top plate that's hovering over the base, this is the hot plate. This is the part that gets to 185 degrees. The bottom is cool. This is just a piece of foam, and it compresses because you want even pressure against the photograph. You can try using a foam iron to actually activate the glue, but you're not going to get even pressure, and so that's why when you use something like this piece of equipment, you're going to get even pressure on the photograph. And so this is the spongy base plate, and then this is a piece of scratch paper that that we put in there because we never want our photograph to be touching the hot plate. Alright, any questions so far? Alright, let's start mounting. Let me show you this tissue paper up against Zoe's photograph. Our photograph is exactly 8 by 10, and our mounting tissue is just slightly larger than it. It gives us just a little tiny bit of wiggle room. So the first thing that we have to do is trim off some of this excess margin that we see. When you do this trimming, I want you to make sure that you are using that guide at the top with the ruler on it. Have the photo up against that. If you insert the photo into the trimmer and it's not up against the photograph, your cuts might not be 90-degree angles, you math people. So, use the guide, push the photograph underneath the plastic guide, and make sure that the border, that margin, hovers out. Slide it away from you and then slide it back towards you. It's okay at this stage if you still have a little bit of that white margin. Let me put it on a piece of black board so that you can see. That's okay if it's there at this point. You can have a little bit of excess. Up against the guide. Slide away from you and then back down. Turn and do the other sides. You're going to be keeping the trimmer flat. It's kind of hard for me to have this like standing up like an 85-degree angle. Alright. The pieces of paper that fall onto the table, just make sure that these go into the garbage or the recycling bin over by the door. Alright, so let's see what we have so far. This is what we need to have. It's going to be a lot easier for us to align the tissue to the photograph without that excess margin. Alright, the next step. With the photograph face down, what I want you to do is place the tissue on top, and it doesn't matter which side. This tissue is double-sided. There's glue on both sides. Line it up like so, and the tacking iron is, what it's going to do is it's going to hold everything together, because we can't just like plop the tissue like that, because it might move around. You need everything to be perfectly aligned, and the tacking iron is going to allow that to happen. We're going to align everything, tack it in place, and then give everything a good trim. So, by the way, this tacking iron, when it's plugged in, it's on. There is no on-off switch. Zoe, you have a question?
Yeah. Are we going to get to pick like black or white if we want
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. It doesn't have an on-off switch, and so eventually what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a power strip that has a switch on it. When it's switched to reset, it's off. When it's on, it's on. All right. The reason why is because this tacking iron, I don't want us to just keep plugging it and unplugging it, plugging it back in every time it's going to be used, because that's going to wear out the cord. And so it's going to be better to have some kind of a switch. The other thing I don't like about this, other than not having a switch, is that it doesn't have an indicator light. So how do we know when this is warmed up? Don't touch it. Okay? Some people like to do that. No, don't touch it. It takes about 5 minutes to warm up. You'll know if it's warmed up when you gently touch the middle of the tissue, about 5 seconds, and then when you lift it up, I like to do a little twisting motion at the same time. So it's like a lift and twist. It's warm enough. Okay, because it tacked, it activated that glue in that spot. So wherever it touched it, it adhered. If you pull on it, it might come apart. So at this point, just unless you messed up, keep it intact. You should tack it in at least 3 spots. Stay away from the corners. Do not tack the corners at this stage, and you'll learn why in a few moments. Another thing is, when you tack it, tack the edges. Pick a couple of edges in addition to the middle. But when you tack it, you don't want to push down on the photograph. Notice how my fingers are underneath the handle. I'm not pushing down. I'm not putting any weight on it. I'm actually letting the weight of the tacking iron put the pressure on the photograph. Just like that. And notice how I'm only using the tip of the iron. We're only using that little tiny bit right there, not the entire flat section of it. It's only the tip that is touching the tissue. Alright, let's check it. I tacked it in 3 spots, there, there, and there. And whenever I tack the sides, I stay about an inch away from the edge. I don't think it's going to move on me. It's not going to come apart, but I'm going to tack it right there just in case. And then pay attention to how it's about an inch away from the edge and that I'm not putting pressure. And also pay attention to how I'm doing that lifting and twisting technique. The reason why I do the lift and twist is because one thing that's happened in the past is you activate the glue, and then if you don't twist, see what happens? It brings the tissue with it. It's like, why does it keep sticking? So if you twist when you lift, the tissue's not going to come up with the iron. Okay. Now, any questions so far? Our corners should be free at this point. Notice how I did not tack the corners. If you tack the corners, the next step, not the next step, but the step after that, it's going to be very difficult. All right, now that the tissue paper and the photograph are one, I'm going to give it another trimming. And this time, the edges are going to be perfectly aligned with each other, and they are not going to move because I tacked it. Now, for this step, I know I told you to use that guide at the top of the trimmer, but there's a problem with the first cut. With my first cut, the tissue is sticking out just a hair. If I use the guide, the tissue is going to be straight, but it's going to make the photo cut crooked. So, because of that, when you trim both the tissue and the photo together, the first cut should be kind of freehand. Don't use the guide, but instead stick the photo underneath and make sure that whatever kind of border remains is going to get cut off. And you're going to lose a little sliver of the photo. That's okay. So you can see, I shaved off a little bit of that dark background on the photo. It's not going to throw off the composition. Now that I have a nice clean edge, the photograph and the tissue both stop right at that edge. That is the edge that I'm going to put up against the guide for the next cut. Oh, I have to put that slider back down. If the blade is up, you can't get the photo in there. So the blade has to be all the way down towards you. Slide that over. Forward and back. And then rotate. Forward. Oh. And it looks like, I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to put it up against the blackboard. You see how I missed a little sliver of that white border? Trim it all off. So I'm going to shave off just a little tiny sliver. You'll notice when you shave off tiny bits of it, the scrap gets curly. You can shave off little tiny fine edges with this trimmer. One more. Throw away the scraps. Okay. Now what we need to do is see what side looks better. You want the photograph to pop out. So what side do you think is better? White. Definitely white. When you have a photograph that has an abundance of black in it, what it could do is it could create the illusion that this is part of the photograph. And it could become abundance negative space, where it's just like too much negative space. But by using a side that makes the photograph pop out, the composition stays intact, and then this becomes more of a frame. So we're going to choose to use the white side. Now, how do we know when this is centered? Well, we could eyeball it, but what I need to do right now, I need to give you guys a cheat sheet template. And this is going to make everybody's lives much easier. So what I'm going to do is take a photograph that I know is centered or close to centered, and I'm going to trace that composition or that layout. So first thing I'm going to do, you don't have to do this with every single photograph, but if something happens to our template, we're going to have to make a new one. And this is how I make templates in the past. Just use a photograph that looks good and trace it. Now what I'm going to do is measure it just to see how well this one was mounted. And if I need to make any adjustments, then I could do that now. Align this real quick. A little over 1.5. Okay, that looks pretty good. So this is what our template looks like. We have the 4 edges of the mat board, and then you have 4 L's. That is going to help us align the photograph within the mat. So I'll show you how to use this. You're going to have your mat board with your photo on top. You're going to place this template on top. Line the 4 edges with the 4 edges of the mat, and then what you're going to do is you're going to reach underneath and move that photograph around until it's nicely within those 4 L's. If it looks crooked, slightly rotate it. And it's hard for me to do that holding it up. Alright. So reach underneath, line it up. Okay, that looks good. Now, before you remove the template, reach underneath, put your hand down, then lift the template. If you just lift the template, it could create a vacuum underneath the piece of paper where the photo will move. And then you have to start over. Once the photo is perfectly centered, don't let it move. Reach for that tacking iron. With one hand, can you see over there? With one hand, carefully hold down the photo. With the other hand, lift up a corner of the photo, but do not lift up the tissue. I'm going to, let's move this out of the way. I'm going to tack the tissue that's exposed now to the board. You only want this thing to touch tissue. You never want this to touch the photo or the board. Not letting it rotate. It could still move at this point because I only have one tack. When you lift the corner, don't lift it up so much that the tissue comes up with it, because then if you tack it, you're going to create a little crimple in it. Don't know if that's a technical word. Crinkle? Bulge? You know what I mean? It's good to tack all 4 corners. If you accidentally tacked the corners when you were tacking the tissue to the photo, this is going to be a very difficult step. You want to be able to lift the corners at this stage.
So all of us have to do this and show that to you?
Yeah, you're going to be doing this to your own photos. Every photo before you turn it in, you have to mount it.
But all of us have to show that one too?
Oh yeah, well that's how it's been done in the past. And sometimes there's going to be a line, but we'll see how it works. I think it's the tacking step that is the most time consuming. So if I can get 2 tacking irons, we could all share a press. Besides, these are under $100. You don't want to know how much those cost. So you could share that, you get another one of those. So I tacked the photo, or I'm sorry, I tacked the tissue to the back of the photo, trimmed, and then I tacked the tissue to the face of the mounting board. So now it's not going to move. It's tacked in place, it's in position, and ready to be permanently bonded using the hot press. So, coming over here, make sure that it's on. Make sure that the thermostat is set to about 185. And the red light should be on, but the orange light should be off. If the orange light is on, what does that mean again?
It's heating up.
It's heating up. Alright. So bring the photo over here. Even though this is called a swing arm style, you don't really have to move that to the side unless you really want to. It might hit the wall because this table is going to be up against the wall. But all you have to do is, without touching the hot plate, stick the photograph underneath the piece of paper. I mean, I could just put it in there and it will press the photo to the board. But if there's any smudges or residue on the hot plate, it's also going to smudge up my photo. And so, yes, I know I need to get a new piece of scratch paper, but this seems to be working really well. So, that piece of paper on top. Also pay attention to how this is image face up. If we put this in upside down, well, the heat is touching the back of the mat. And now you're expecting the heat to travel through the thick mat board and activate the glue, which doesn't really work. Alright? So if you ever mount a photo and you're like, why isn't it adhering? Why isn't it working? It's not really getting good pressure. It's probably because you have the photo in face down. Photo face up with the paper on top. And then grab this handle. When you want to press it, lower it, and then lock. It's not going to come up easily. And now looking at that red hand on the clock, make sure that it goes around one full time plus a half for 90 seconds. Any questions so far? All right. I expect you to forget at least one or two steps in this process. And there are a lot of steps in this process, and so I have been working on a handout for you, and I'm going to put that on the photo share, but also I'm going to take the movie that's being filmed now and I'm going to put that on the photo share in the Digital Photography 1 folder. So if you ever get lost, you can reference the handout and watch the movie demonstration again. All right. So that's about one revolution. I need 30 seconds more. The instructions that came with the mounting tissue, it says 1.5 to 3 minutes. And in my experience with this tissue and this press, 1.5 is sufficient. All right. It's about that time to pull this out. So, to unlock it, you're going to grab the handle, and sometimes if you lift up, it takes the whole thing with it. If that happens, just put a little bit of body weight on the arm, and then pull up on the handle to unlock the top plate. When you handle this, only handle it by the edges or the back, because any grease from your fingers will smudge the mounting, the margin area, which we don't want to happen. You can't really clean that up once there's a smudge on it. So pass that around and hold it by the edge or by the back. And it's a little warm. Alright, if you are the last person to use this equipment, please make sure that you turn this off with that switch. When you store the press, you're going to store it in the up position. Do not store it like that. You're going to store it in the up position. Can you close that door, please? When you are done with this tacking iron, if you are the last person to use this, since there is no on-off, like I said before, there will be an on-off switch on the actual power strip. And I'm going to try to store the power strip on the table here so that you don't have to bend over and reach underneath the table to get to it. So it should be right here. Just reach over and push the switch so that it turns it off. I know this looks weird not having some kind of like a stand to prop this up, but we haven't seen any issues with just setting this on the table. It's the tip that we use, that very tip right there that gets 185 degrees. But the back of the tip, I mean, it's okay if it touches the table. And we're only using the tip over here, so we shouldn't be getting any tacking residue on the table. So you could just leave it on the table like that. Just don't put it on something that's paper. All right? The table is fine. Any questions? Okay. When you are done with mounting it, what you will be doing is grabbing a print rubric. So far you've only filled out contact sheet rubrics, but we're going to have a print rubric starting next week. And what you're going to be doing is you're actually going to be using masking tape, and you're going to tape that rubric to the back of your photo. On the front of the photo, you'll have to do two things. You're going to have to add a title and a signature. After all, photography is an art class. It fulfills an art requirement. So treat this like it's artwork. And any good artwork has a title or a name to it. And a lot of paintings have signatures, just like photography has signatures. So if you look at all of the examples on the wall, one thing that you'll notice is that at the bottom left corner, just underneath the image, you'll see a title. Now don't just come up with like, a real obvious title. Like I could look at that and call it lighter, okay, or incense, okay? But that doesn't conjure up any kind of emotional connection to the image. So when you think of a title, you need to put your creative writing caps on. I want you to think of a title that tells the viewer something that they cannot know by looking at the photo. Let them into the scene. So, what would a possible title for that be? I'm looking at you because you took the photo. Not lighter, not incense. What could it be?
I want to think of something stupid.
Okay, well, what do I not know? I don't know blank by looking at this photo. Who's holding it? Who's lighting it? What type of incense is it? Sandalwood. Sandalwood would be a better title for this photograph than incense, because I can't tell that that's sandalwood by looking at it. Or moonlight, or whatever kind of froofy incense names there are, right? So think of like something that tells the viewer something new. When you look at the titles that are up here in the examples, you'll notice that they never cross these imaginary lines. And this is going to make your finished photo look so much neater. For instance, this imaginary line here. The title is never to the left of that. And then this imaginary line, which is the right edge of the photo, the signature never crosses that imaginary line. Keep them tight within those imaginary lines. All right? They should be directly beneath the photo, not off corners. And for that step, please use pencil. Do not use ballpoint pen, and do not use gel pens or milk pens, whatever they're called. Yes, they will show up on black, much more so than a pencil does, but it tends to be a distraction. When we look at the photograph, we could tell that there's a signature there. We can tell that there is a title. If we wanted to read it, we can read pencil on blackboard. Of course, it's going to show up more on the whiteboard, but pen just tends to be a distraction. It tends to be too dark, and you can't erase it if you mess up. And anyways, these boards don't erase well, even with pencil. It will smudge, so just be very careful. When it comes to your signature, you don't have to make it look neat or legible. It can be your check signing signature. Does anybody have a checking account? Do you write checks yet? Okay, good. It could be your artistic signature if you like to do drawings and sign your paintings. It could be that artistic signature. It doesn't have to be legible. I'm going to know it's your photograph because you're going to tape a rubric to the back of it. So there's no doubt who did that. But we still need to have the signature and the title on the front. Any questions about the mounting process? Okay. Then that's all. Let's push stop.